Welcome to the Indiana General Assembly. Let's meet Representative Dick Hamm.
Hello.
Okay, just 3 seconds in and already shame to anyone making humorous shenanigans out of this man's name.
Dick Hamm.
He is Representative Dick Hamm. Richard Hamm, first of his name, born to Mr. and Mrs. Hamm of Hamsbury.
Show some respect.
Dick Hamm was part of a group of lawmakers who, in 2015, were debating whether or not to legalize the aquamation process in the fine state of Indiana. Now, if you don't remember, when I lounged in a bath while explaining aquamation,
Alkaline hydrolysis? What's that? Some kind of corpse spa treatment?
which I was later roasted for by a drag queen,
You can't see today's pendant because it slipped beneath the murky waters.
then a primer. Think of aquamation, aka alkaline hydrolysis, aka water cremation, as dissolving the dead body with a final bath, aqua, as opposed to a final flame, cree, or fire. In an aquamation, the body is placed in a mix of high heat water and potassium hydroxide. Pressure is applied, and the body decomposes down to its chemical components. You essentially dissolve into the water. Whether you choose water cremation or fire cremation, your corpse will end the process as a container of crushed bones, which your family can take home, scatter, or bury. But we already have cremation. Why do we need aquamation too?
What do we need aquamation to?
Well, there's the environmental aspect. Aquamation uses just 1/4 of the energy of a flame cremation, and has no emissions like carbon dioxide and mercury vapor from dental fillings. There's more reasons you might choose aquamation. We'll come back to those, but first, Dick Hamm.
Dick Hamm.
In 2015, when Dick Hamm and his fellow legislators were debating the Indiana Aquamation Bill, the process itself was already established and well tested. It had been legalized in 10 other states and had been used for years at medical schools like the Mayo Clinic and UCLA. But still, every new death option, looking at you, Aquamation, looking at you, human composting, looking at you, Caitlinmation. Caitlinmation is when you donate your body to my body farm and I don't tell you what happens to it ever. Just don't worry about it, okay? Every new death option is considered guilty until proven innocent. But in Indiana, it was looking good. The bill had already passed through the House's Public Health Committee and was marching toward legalization. Then, onto the Indiana House floor stepped Representative Dick Hamm. Hamm took the microphone and began to speak his truth.
A country is great when it takes care of its dead. We keep going backwards and backwards and backwards, taking care of the people we're supposed to love. And you can tell I feel pretty passionate about this. I urge you to vote no on this bill.
What would cause Representative Hamm to come out so strongly against this death care bill? I know what you're thinking. Those partisan American politics. Hamm was a Republican, but so was the lawmaker who introduced the aquamation bill. Representative Hamm, it appears you have more to say?
We're gonna put the bodies in acid and just let them dissolve away, and then we're gonna let them run down the drain out into the sewers and whatever.
There is a lot to unpack there. As I mentioned, aquamation uses high heat water and alkali to rapidly decompose the dead body. No offense to acid, but it's the wrong pH for the job. Your local funeral director isn't stuffing your mom into a barrel of acid. He's a funeral director, Dick, not a drug kingpin on a Netflix drama.
Wanna buy some drugs, Jason Bateman?
As for dissolving bodies down the drain, he's referring to the small amount of neutralized and sterilized amino acids, peptides, and salts that may go down the drain, or sometimes are donated to local farms. But that's not any different than the blood, bile, and intestinal fluid that is also sent down the drain during an embalming procedure. Now next, for some reason, Representative Hamm starts coming after regular cremation, which is legal, you can't, no backsies on that one.
When you cremate somebody, 20% of that body does not cremate. It has to be crushed, sometimes beat up with a hammer.
Cremation leaves behind 6 to 8 pounds of inorganic bone fragments. These bone fragments are pulverized by a machine into uniform, scatterable ashes. Thinking back to my time as a crematory operator, I'm imagining Hamm's belief that I stood there individually smashing bones and uncooked organs with a hammer, just whack, 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 whack. Representative Hamm's anti-aquamation diatribe would have been more amusing in retrospect if it hadn't worked. His speech took what was an uncontentious Republican-proposed bill and ended its life, resulting in a final vote of 34 to 59 against legalizing aquamation in Indiana. What's a shame is that we may never understand why Representative Hamm was so against— I'm sorry. What's that you said? In addition to being a representative in the state of Indiana, Dick Hamm also owns a casket company? I'm sorry, owns 2 casket companies? And was the president of the Casket and Funeral Supply Association of America?
Hail to the chief.
But that would mean Dick Hamm stood to lose the most financially from a passage of a bill legalizing aquamation. Oh, I see. If a family chooses aquamation over a more conventional burial, the family would no longer be required to purchase thousands, often tens of thousands of dollars worth of funeral products, caskets and vaults and headstones. Given those very same caskets are made by Hamm, he probably should have recused himself from voting on that one. Something Hamm not only didn't do, but came to give a speech on the House floor wildly mischaracterizing the process as putting Grandma on a one-way trip to a sewer-bound acid bath. Hamm would later acknowledge that aquamation
Could reduce the need for cremation, caskets, or whatever.
but told the Indianapolis Star he saw no conflict of interest and no need to recuse himself from the vote.
I'm not worried about it from the standpoint of how many caskets we're going to sell or not sell because of that particular means of disposing bodies. I'm thinking about it from the standpoint of it's just not very human.
In 2018, Representative Dick Never Apologize Hamm, 3-time incumbent, was voted out in his Republican primary. His challenger received more than double his vote total, but the damage was already done, and aquamation remains illegal in the state of Indiana. When you hear a story like this, it's easy to believe there's a shadowy cabal of funeral industry people who are against these new options.
We don't like it, Caitlin.
And it certainly felt like that when I started my career 15 years ago. But today, there's not a fully united funeral industry. Here are my completely unscientific made-up statistics on this. Percentages, courtesy, nothing, my brain, don't quote me. Can we also do a fake chart here? I'm gonna say, anecdotally, 25% of funeral directors are genuinely excited about aquamation, as well as organic reduction, that's human composting, becoming available for their families and themselves. Then there are 50% of the funeral directors who are sort of in the middle, ambivalent. They see the funeral industry as a business. They're open-minded folks and willing to put out new options on their price list and see how it goes. Then there are the final 25% who are in the Hamm camp. The Hamp, if you will.
You want some beans?
Hamm is far from the only funeral industry person I've heard disparage or downright refuse to understand aquamation. Our former state funeral home inspector, let's call him Jack, had a long career as an embalmer.
Hi.
Jack, who I always liked, by the way, was very open about his affinity for the old ways of funeral service. When he found out I was pushing for the legalization of aquamation in California, he looked at me and said,
So, you want to be the one to make Mom into a stew?
Jack, you know that's not what aquamation is.
I guess Mom wants to be 1 part hot water, 1 part caustic chemicals.
In fairness, most Americans don't know what aquamation is, but most Americans aren't state funeral board inspectors. I didn't say that to Jack, I should have. I get that this final group of funeral directors can seem comically villainous. But try as we might to frame it this way on the internet, most people are not one-dimensional villains. I'm not and they're not. Many of these funeral directors really do believe it's somehow disrespectful for a body to be dissolved or to decompose naturally into the earth. And to be fair, it's not just the funeral directors who have a profound fear of decomposition. Which brings us to the media.
I don't have to tell you things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad.
Let's take a trip down memory lane and look at some old aquamation headlines.
The fight to legalize a machine that melts flesh from bone.
A cremation process that leaves only bones and brown syrup.
Plans for water cremation on hold due to fear of liquefied people in sewers.
Have a glass of Grandad. Plan to flush the dead down the drain.
Forget cremation. Alkaline hydrolysis is the eco-friendly way to dispose of the dead, but it means turning them into goo.
The subtitle of the goo headline is Doughty, a mortician from Los Angeles, describes the process.
Editor's note. Doughty did not, in fact, describe the aquamation process as
turning bodies into goo. I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but I think we're getting over the hump of those Wild West early headlines on green death technology. After his death earlier this year, the Archbishop Desmond Tutu chose to be aquamated. Look at these headlines. What is aquamation? The green alternative to cremation. South Africans intrigued by Desmond Tutu's choice of aquamation. Tutu's very principled and unorthodox choice, unorthodox especially for South Africa, humanized the process. You can't write the headline, Archbishop turned to goo, or flush the Archbishop down the drain. Not only would it be disrespectful, but as a news source, you're required to do the work to find out what's really true about the process, and why green funeral advocates, including Desmond Tutu, would make this choice. Ironically, I don't think composting, perhaps because it came about a few years later, has had it quite as bad as aquamation. Human composting becomes an option in Washington. But is it for everyone? Americans are being turned into human compost to save the planet. Sure, there are still some doozies.
Letters to the editor. Composting dead bodies is disrespectful. What's next? Soylent Green?
Composting corpses is creepy and wrong.
Human composting.
The ultimate denial of the soul. Here's the thing. Historically, we've seen this all play out before with your friend and mine, cremation.
Hey girl.
Funeral industry hating it, the Catholic Church banning it, the media sensationalizing it. We've been down this road before. In 1981, a headline in the Chicago Sun-Times asked, "Thinking of choosing cremation? Beware, as grisly tales discourage it." An article warned that, quote, "ghastly things happen to bodies inside cremation chambers." They're cremated? Presumably. If you actually read the article, the expose was not about the cremation process, but funeral directors who were convincing grieving families to select burial over cremation with lines like,
Have you ever fried frog's legs? Have you ever seen bacon cooking on a skillet? Would you burn your children?
An investigation found that families were visiting funeral homes and being told cremation was the equivalent of putting mom in the garbage disposal, and advised they would be, quote,
tormented later by guilt and remorse.
The article's message was an important public service. Do your own research on cremation and don't let a funeral director talk you out of it. But should you be scanning the headlines with your morning coffee, all you would see is that grisly and gruesome tales discourage cremation. But as I've been saying for years, no one, especially not the government or funeral directors, should get to be the arbiter of what is objectively gruesome and what is objectively meaningful ritual when it comes to the dead body. Take the legalization of aquamation in my home state of Hawaii. A large part of the advocacy around it came from native Hawaiian groups. The bones themselves are at the center of traditional Hawaiian funeral practice, as they are where a person's spirit, or mana, lives. Historically, the bones would be placed in an underground oven, an imu, in order to clean flesh from bone. State Senator Jarrett Keohokalole, who proposed the aquamation legalization, said, "You know in modern Hawaii, ohana are not allowed to make an imu next to the beach to practice their burial practices in the old style." He's saying, essentially, you can't dig a corpse defleshing oven on the beach, which I think you should be able to do. But through aquamation, the family can receive the bones back, white and defleshed, akin to what they would receive after the emu process. It's using modern technology as a bridge between the old ways and modern life. As of July 2022, aquamation for humans was signed into law. Several years earlier, in 2017, it was time to try and legalize the process in California. Again, a legalization bill had already failed once, back in 2010. Rumor was the failure had been quietly aided by a large corporate funeral chain.
We'll get ya.
Allegedly. This new bill was introduced by Assemblyman Todd Gloria, who represented San Diego, the location of a new water cremation manufacturer, Kiko. Kiko was founded by two colleagues of mine who realized it would have to be all hands on deck to get the bill passed this time around. This time, the bill was voted through various committees without much fanfare. Not even the Catholic Church could stop it, though they did try.
The power of Christ compels you!
They're always trying it, the Catholic Church.
It's God himself who commands you.
Those little rascals.
Who, me?
But suddenly, bad news. The bill had stalled in the Appropriations Committee, the committee where bills get funded, the "how much is this gonna cost us" committee. My nonprofit, the Order of the Good Death, loves this type of challenge. We researched all the lawmakers involved, how to best reach them, and turned to you, the Green Death Avengers, to write letters and lead social media campaigns. The head of the committee was Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez, who, in her guide for online advocates and campaigns, requested the use of cute animal photos and GIFs. I am absolutely not kidding. And thus, we were going to shower this powerful woman, keeper of the Royal Californian coin, with all the adorable animal gifts she could handle. Here's a tweet from our executive director, Sarah Chavez.
Lorena Gonzalez, please support lower-cost green options for working, grieving families.
Hundreds of you went to work. And that very night, Assemblywoman Gonzalez tweeted,
#I need wine. Why? Among other issues, I have morticians tweeting at me.
When I tell you my heart sank. The Assemblywoman had said she wanted all those cat gifts. Had we sent too many cat gifts? Are morticians sending cat gifts somehow more threatening? Or did she not understand aquamation and think it was a ghoulish process, a Dick Hamm acid bath that was bad for California?
It's bad for California.
If only there was some way to speak to her directly. My eyes glanced over to her Twitter message button. Were her direct messages open? You can't just slide into the DMs of the chair of the California Assembly Appropriations Committee. Or can you? I'm sorry to see you put morticians tweeting at you on a list of negative things, my direct message began. I regret this opener. In retrospect, this sounds sort of passive-aggressive, which was not my intention. In my defense, this was my first time DMing an Assemblywoman. I introduced myself and explained I owned a small funeral home in Los Angeles, and Californians really deserved this environmentally friendly option. I explained we were passionate, not creepy, not entirely true, nice folks, happy to answer any question to get this bill passed. Not only did she reply, she replied fast.
I'm sorry if it sounded negative. You all are doing an exceptional job of blowing up my personal Twitter feed.
Ma'am, with all due respect, this is your public Assemblywoman Twitter, and your desire for animal gifts was explicitly stated. Assemblywoman Gonzalez admitted the aquamation process was actually one of the most interesting things she had coming in front of her, and was
impressed by the reach and breadth of folks tweeting at me.
She was extremely professional and thanked us for challenging her view of who works in death and who cares about this legislation. In a few days, the bill unstalled, passed through the Appropriations Committee, went to the governor, and aquamation is now legal in the state of California. Now, I'm not saying it was 100% your cat gifts that did it, but I think they really helped. Depending on how you view this situation, it can either be a dystopian tale of lobbying in the 21st century, or a heartwarming tale of access and advocacy. To me, Assemblywoman Gonzalez being willing to directly correspond with me was impressive. For the last 100 years, lobbying has come from the funeral industry. Money, lobbyists, men like Representative Dick Hamm. Now the lobbying can also come quite forcefully from normal fans of water dissolution like you and me. After our experience with the aquamation bill, we were feeling quite confident when the work began to legalize composting in California. We should not have been. What I've learned is that every time you feel like you're on a roll, sliding into important DMs, your ego will quickly be bruised, your voice will not be heard, like in my case, literally not heard, like the time Katrina Spade and I were supposed to testify in front of the Senate. The bill is 7th on the docket at around 11:30 in the morning, but in reality, the bill wasn't heard until 3:30 in the afternoon after fervent debates on blockchain, nursing licenses, and puppies, kittens, and rabbits for sale. At last,
Caitlin? We have Caitlin Doughty speaking in support of the bill,
announces the chairman. Silence echoes through the Senate chamber. Caitlin was waiting in a COVID-era perdition hellscape of hold music on some AT&T teleconference line. I never got through to testify, neither did Katrina. No one testified in favor of the composting bill as we just listened to the hold music as the senators moved past us. That day I was so wrapped up in this little fiasco, I forgot it was my parents' 50th wedding anniversary.
Caitlin.
How could you? I'm a bad daughter and an ineffective advocate. So you have your little cry, your tiny dirge for your ego, and you move on. We've talked about this before, but in 2020, the composting bill was killed due to pandemic funding. In 2021, it was killed because Governor Gavin Newsom was facing a statewide recall vote, and California Democrats were not interested in standing out too much, quote, for being weird by having him vote on human composting. Every time, hundreds of letters from you. So much work from Katrina's team and the sponsor, Assemblymember Garcia's office. And you can't help but feel like it's all going to waste. But we chip away, one letter, one law, one cat gif at a time. And each time it begins to feel more normal, more sure, more inevitable. So, in 2022, hundreds of you wrote again. And last month, it was legalized in California. At this point, you may be saying, composting, aquamation, this is my destiny for my future corpse. Bring it to my place of death. How can I help? Well, just find a lawmaker who's super pumped to sponsor a bipartisan composting aquamation bill. Done. I mean, if you can do that, great. But realistically, it's about the power of sheer numbers. Of you letting your representatives and government know it's what you want. Be relentless, be passionate. It's your right and privilege to tell them what you want. If you're working on a bill in your state with sponsorship, let my organization know we can work with you to coordinate and signal boost. Our nonprofit is launching a podcast to speak more in depth on issues we're working on, and this month we're getting into the nitty-gritty of the legalization process. I'll be talking to Katrina Spade, composting guru, and Sarah Chavez, the Order's executive director. I'll link that below.
Hi, do you like things like this? And this? It's the iconic chicken from the Ask a Mortician videos. And this? It's a taxidermied pigeon. Well, you're in luck because your friend Caitlin is moving and everything, I mean everything, must go.
I have accumulated a lot of strange things over the years, and since the iconic stuffed chicken doesn't need to move across the country, we've decided to raise money for the Good Death Fellowship, which gives financial support and resources to leaders in the death positive movement who are helping people die better. So if you need anything, from a stuffed chicken to our 1 million subscriber play button from YouTube, there's a link to the auction which is happening starting Black Friday. 100% of the money will go to the Fellows program, and it will make moving so much easier. God bless you.
Oh my gosh, there's so many announcements in this video, but this is an evergreen announcement. Patrons, in the face of community violations gate, you have been so supportive and have stepped up so much. You all have. Thank you. From the bottom of our black little hearts. Here, in honor of you, is a chemical equation for alkaline hydrolysis water bottle we designed for patrons. And a song. We made you a song. So take us out, song.
There was a man, his name Dick Hamm, and Hamsbury 'twas his native land. And this Dick Hamm, he was oh so grand, for he was a man called Dick Hamm. Dick Hamm despised aquamation, neither did he like ye old cremation. Dick Hamm wanted to bury you, for to old Dick Hamm 'twas the humane thing to do. Dick Hamm, Dick Hamm. This Dick Hamm was a casket man, and aquamation fit not into his plan. So he said some words, Dick Hamm was hurt, and so buried he aquamation. Then Dick Hamm lost his seat. Oh, Dick Hamm suffered great defeat. Didn't want to lose, refused to recuse, but still Dick Hamm didst lose everything. Dick Hamm, Dick Hamm. Now this Dick Hamm was not John Hamm, for John Hamm was an actor man, and this John Hamm, he was thought quite mad, and so they called him a madman. Dick Hamm is not John Hamm. Who is John Hamm to old Dick Hamm? Aquamation doesn't fit in his plan. It's bad for California and everywhere. Dick Hamm, Dick Hamm. Now then, Caitlin, she sat on hold, listening to music that was not bold. She often thought of old Dick Hamm, and that's why she forgot her parents then. Caitlin, it was their 50th anniversary, it only comes once. But I suppose your voice was rose, and so secured human compost. There was a man, his name Dick Hamm, and Hamsbury 'twas his native land. And this Dick Hamm, he was oh so grand, for he was a man called Dick Hamm. Dick Hamm despised aquamation, neither did he like ye old cremation. Dick Hamm wanted to bury you, for to old Dick Hamm 'twas the humane thing to do. Dick Hamm, Dick Hamm. This Dick Hamm was a casket man, and aquamation fit not into his plan. So he said some words, Dick Hamm was hurt, and so buried he aquamation. Then Dick Hamm lost his seat. Oh, Dick Hamm suffered great defeat. Didn't want to lose, refused to recuse, but still Dick Hamm did lose everything.